Welcome to Understand Tomorrow, where we invite industry-leading thinkers and doers to tell their stories and impart their wisdom with the next generations. I'm your host, Kevin, and today I have the pleasure of hosting Bobby, who's a seasoned technology entrepreneur with an incredible amount of passion and energy. Bobby, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kevin.
Bobby, one of the first things that I realized about you is that you're a lifelong learner. I started looking into, the things that you were studying, and it really got me going. I'm really curious, what is something that you're really into, and what does curiosity mean to you?
Yeah, I believe in lifelong learning as one of the key factors of successful people. And of course, there are some extreme cases like Bill Gates reading, many books per year. And
Yeah. Every time he goes on a trip, he takes 12 books, a sack of books.
Exactly.
And he reads all in a span of 7 days. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy, yeah. But I admire that. And I believe that especially in the information age that we live in, one has to continuously update their knowledge, skills, make sure that they're up to speed with everything happening, everything new.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in business, it helps a lot to see different people's perspective. Online courses, they're something that I've always been very passionate about. Even since my bachelor's, I was doing a lot of those, and still when I have the time, I try to. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time as much as I would like to.
So what do you use now to, let's say, cultivate your knowledge, or just feed your curiosity? Do you read? Do you watch videos? What's the type of content you consume?
Actually, in the past couple of years, the one that mostly I've been using are audiobooks.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it gives me the flexibility to listen to them while commuting, while
learning on the go. It's amazing.
And especially in the gym, for example, it suddenly turns the gym not into just a physical workout, but also listening into something new, something that will pick your mind. Podcasts are also something that I started listening to. There's a lot of them. It takes some time to pick the best ones and the ones that you can take the most value out. But once you find the ones that you really like, I definitely recommend. And of course, books. But as I said, it's difficult to find the time to relax and sit down.
Yeah, I completely get you. I'm on the same page. I love podcasts. I love audio content, and I also like video content. When you have the time to actually sit down, I think that's great.
Something that I actually would like to mention, something that I've been noticing more and more that has a very, very interesting effect, is things that I've learned or books that I've read 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
When I go through them again, there's always something new that I wouldn't have realized the first time reading it, and it helps put things into perspective, how things changed for myself, from my personal point of view in the past 5 years, for example. This helps a lot. And recently I tried, this is the most recent example, I tried to go through some courses that I did in my bachelor's and in my master's, just so I would see how differently I think compared to back then, and the difference is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, ultimately, it's more about what can you extract from the content. There's a lot of good content out there, but it's more what can you get out of it, and you need context to be able to really take something useful from there. So I think I also realized that I realized how if I look back 3 years, I realized how stupid I was, clueless about so many things, and didn't have the proper context to really take all that information and apply it in the real world. So I also realized that. So let's talk about how you applied, let's say, the knowledge that you acquired. You're the co-founder and the CEO of two futuristic companies, AI Lab One and Space Mining Technologies. Tell us more about that. How did they come to be? What's the story behind them?
They both have very interesting stories, actually. Space Mining Technology started in 2017 in September, and it started through a startup weekend, a space startup weekend that I joined without knowing anyone there. And I managed to form a team of 6 other people at that event. It was a 3-day hackathon, and we had to come up with physical prototype and a business plan for something related to space. It's funny because we were the only team that worked on space exploration related idea. Everyone was working on downstream applications, which is applying space technologies, like, for example, satellite data for Earth applications.
Right.
And no one believed in our idea. And our idea, it changed a bit since then, but the general summary of it is that we are aiming to harvest water on the surface of the moon eventually, to be able to sell it directly there, provide it to astronautic missions that are being planned in the upcoming decade. And it's interesting because no one believed in us.
Yeah.
And from the jury, there were people from the European Space Agency, people from Airbus, from some of the biggest space organizations in Europe. They said, yeah, okay, it's interesting, but I don't see the potential in that. This was in 2017. Already a few months later, after the event, we were the only team that was still working on that.
Yeah, that actually like went on to build it.
Even the winners, they stopped working almost immediately.
Yeah. That's what I really, I love these competitions. On the surface, they're amazing, but most people don't actually pursue their dream. What made you like different? Like, why were you like, what, I'll put my energy and time into this? Why was it special?
It was the passion. It's just the passion for space exploration. And I personally have always been fascinated with space exploration. I was like 3-4 years old when I was building paper-based models of rockets just from some kids' books and stuff. And I was like, wow, I want to be a space explorer. And I was watching all these amazing animations back then in the 90s that inspired me to really like the cosmos and space. And we continued working with the team. There were quite a few changes within the team because actually not everyone from the initial team continued. And about 2.5 years now, since then, we are still doing research and development. We are still pushing very hard. The team has doubled, and it's amazing. And we are all super inspired and excited with the things to come from there. AI Lab 1, on the other hand, also has an interesting story, but a bit different. With a couple of friends, we were sitting here in The Hague and we were like, wow, there's nothing about AI happening in the city. And there's so much potential, not only for private sector, but also having The Hague as the seat of government in the Netherlands, as well as so many NGOs having their European offices here.
Yeah, right.
Like, wow, there's so much potential. Let's start something. So we started a meetup group, organizing weekly events on AI, and we started inviting presenters, speakers. We started organizing workshops as well because we saw the need and the interest of a lot of people to learn what artificial intelligence actually is in terms of coding and technical aspect. So we started this, and only a few months after, we started thinking, all right, maybe the next step is to start doing commercial projects. And we were already building a big community of all kinds of people interested in AI, not only technical people, but also people with various domain knowledge. For example, legal professionals and psychologists or medical professionals, all interested in AI. So we were like, wow, we really need to make something out of this community. And that's how we started. And to follow up on your question on so many hackathons and such initiatives, the idea stopped there.
Right.
One of the programs that we are actually running through the AI Lab for the past 1 year is together with 2 other organizations, World Startup and Space for Good. We are running post-hackathon support focused on challenges and ideas related to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We are providing the AI expertise. Space for Good are providing the satellite data and remote sensing expertise, while World Startup is a startup accelerator, so the business side of it. And together we join forces to do this.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you chose to focus on SDGs. Is there like a reason behind that? I think it makes sense to maybe like have some concrete goals to push towards.
Well, the SDGs are something that I believe everyone should be concerned about and everyone should be striving to contribute to. Every company, every business, every government, an NGO, every individual, there's no too small contribution. Everyone can help, even just by spreading the word. And that's actually the reason why we call this program the mothership, because we this is our mothership, the planet.
Right.
It's the only one, and there's so many problems that we need to focus on. Although, as I mentioned already, I love space exploration and it's my true passion. There's still a lot of things to be done here on Earth, so that's what we are focusing on. And in terms of contribution, a misconception, well, I wouldn't call it a misconception, actually. It's more of a lot of people were skeptical about the profitability and the commercial side of peace tech, for example, or tech for good. However, to quote my close friends from the Peace Innovation Institute here in The Hague, doing peace projects could actually be very profitable. Technology for good, peace, technology for peace, all of this, sustainability can be profitable. And a lot of corporates and business organizations don't realize that. And it's not just that we need to save the climate or the planet. We also can actually have a really good impact on society if we focus on the positive effects on the human being, on society, on the environment, instead of the highest return on investment.
Yeah. I think that long-term thinking will put you ahead. I mean, you're trying to solve like, some of the world's greatest problems, and for you to be able to do that, you have to think on a very long term. And I think if you become a missionary instead of a mercenary, I think Jeff Bezos actually made this distinction. You're actually going to be better off than the ones who are trying to make the money in the long term.
Exactly.
They're trying to profit, but you're thinking long term, and you're building towards that bigger vision. And is that what you're trying to do with both companies?
Yeah, definitely. Space exploration, of course, that's a very long term.
Yeah, it's goal. A very long term game.
And that's when it comes to space mining technologies, one of our biggest challenges is the current lack of market. So we are trying to cater to a market that doesn't even exist yet.
Right.
There's a lot of plans, and it can scale quite fast in proportion in just a few years, but it's not there yet. But when it comes to climate change, sustainable development, etc., there's already things that can immediately help.
Yeah, for sure. And the needs is there. Like it's increasingly urgent. So that makes a lot of sense. So your AI initiative, how does it contribute to those goals?
Well, AI Lab 1 right now is running 2 innovation programs. One is the mothership, together with partners that I already mentioned. And we are also running an AI in healthcare innovation program as well, open innovation, where anyone can come and give their opinion, develop an idea. And the program runs for 4 months, assisting passionate entrepreneurs, medical professionals, technical people. Anyone who is interested in AI for healthcare can come and help develop a concept.
Right.
And we don't do that for ourselves. We do it for to inspire people, and for them to start their own business, to start their own company that will solve such a problem. On the other hand, we are also trying to develop our own products. One thing that we are really passionate about, and actually maybe this will be the first time that I'm talking publicly about it, we started researching a few months ago on the possibility to predict cancer early on using artificial intelligence. And we are super passionate about that, and it's still in a very early stage. It's we're just doing some research to see the feasibility of it. And there's a lot of hype around it. but it's detecting cancer. Everyone is working on detecting cancer once it's already there.
Right.
And very few people are working on predicting cancer before it actually happens.
Yeah, and like the healthcare of the future is prevention. Like that is going to be the focus, right? That's going to save a tremendous amount of time and resources if you're able to know before it even occurs. And I think AI can definitely play a big role there. And
AI will play a big role in everything, including healthcare.
Yeah,
it will actually help. It's funny, while I was studying in Erasmus 6 years ago, there was a talk by Chief Innovation Officer or something like that of Philips, and he was already talking
Jerome Tass? Is it? It's another guy. Okay,
I don't remember his name, but it already inspired me. He was talking about exactly because one of Philips' focus areas is HealthTech.
Yeah,
they're building systems for hospitals.
Right.
He was talking exactly about that, about prevention instead of curing, and I was mind blown. And then he was talking about going farther into the future and about human augmentation and how our even immune system a few decades down the road will be run by technology, and it's fascinating.
That's so crazy, right? With like nanobots like in our bloodstream fighting on our behalf and stuff like that. That's just ridiculous.
Imagine if we had that right now with coronavirus outbreak and stuff like that.
I mean, that's debatable, right? I mean, I think those nanobots probably would be able to maybe fight what they already know. So who knows? But we could potentially tackle something like the coronavirus. Like imagine we do have like a vaccine and we could just like program those bots or some sort of thing.
But most importantly, it will boost your immune system.
Yeah.
That's what the biggest benefit will be. You have
and you'll also be more aware of your body. I think like increasingly, we have to get out. Like there's already a psychological barrier. You have to get out of the house. You have to go to the doctor. You sit down. They take some measures. But what if you already like just understand your body so well, just for analytics? So you just and that's already there, with let's say the wearables,
Yeah, that's actually a big focus in the health tech industry, moving the focus from the hospital to the home of the patient, where the patient will be able to, through the use of technology and through the use of modern channels to talk with specialists, they'll be able to actually have diagnosis a lot easier and a lot faster, rather than going and waiting in line.
Yeah, it's much better. I think a nice combination, of course, is probably what the future consumer would want, what we would like, but we cannot have, but I would like, okay, so to get back to your companies, I'm really curious, like what are some personal challenges that you faced along the way as you built, your team and these companies? There must have been some, let's say, personal struggles. What are those, how did you keep going? What motivated you?
Of course, there's always a lot of struggles when it comes to entrepreneurship. For my two companies, actually, I would say for both of them, one of the biggest challenges always has been convincing people of the value of it, because so this is exponential technology that we're talking about,
right.
And it's something that it's very innovative, and a lot of people are focused too much on the short-term return on investment. And so first of all, they're looking into such short-term engagement. Wow, very often this can be longer term.
Yeah. It has to be in this context. Like you have to think long-term for you to be like, this is worth my time, At this point, it is not tangible. People cannot feel it. And they also know that it's going to require putting in, work day in, day out for a long time before it pays, the big check, right?
And that's especially true for space mining technologies.
Yeah.
For AI Lab 1, it's more about convincing people in the benefit of this new way of doing business.
Yeah.
With data first, AI first processes. It could be very disruptive, especially for organizations that have been operating for quite a while. for decades, and their processes are quite old. It's so difficult, and very often there's a champion. I like to call them. There's a champion within the organization that's very innovative oriented and very open-minded.
Yeah.
And then they have to convince everyone else within the organization that unless they adopt this technology, they might actually not be in business in a few years because they won't be competitive. And for AI, one of the things that I always tell to people is, so there's also a lot of fear, of course. That's a big, another big problem. A lot of people are like, yeah, is AI going to replace us, or is it going to reduce the number of people working and blah, blah, blah. Well, I always say no. It will just automate your work, and it will make you a lot more efficient and a lot more focused on what's important. And then those who are using these new tools like artificial intelligence will be a lot more competitive than those who are not.
Right.
So it's not about replacing, but it's just literally using these amazing new tools against people that are not using it. Of course, you have more competitive advantage in the market.
Competitive advantage. Like, even if you think from a government level, from a company level, like they just, why is, for instance, the race for AI between, let's say, China and the US? It's because the first one who breaks through will have a tremendous competitive advantage. Tremendous. And on a company level as well. This is, if you're able to leverage your data to that extent, you will have a tremendous advantage.
Yeah, exactly. People ask me sometimes, what would that advantage actually be in terms of measures? Can you measure it? I'm like, no, I can't measure it. And some people say, imagine the internet. I'm like, no, imagine electricity. Imagine if you have to compete against someone who has electricity and you don't.
Right.
They immediately have advantage because they can work in the evening and you can't, for example. Just the easiest.
Yeah, and I think that is mildly applicable because, AI will work day in, day out. That it's going to use this computational power, and it in the future, supposedly, if we develop it to that extent, it could be equal your whole workforce, to the power of, right? So there's not a number you can attach on it, but that computational power, like, we cannot even think about how powerful that is, at least now, but even today it has a lot of power, and people are not making use of that. So I guess you realize this is a market that you can just tap into immediately.
Of course. And further into the future, when you introduce technologies like quantum computing, for example, and then really get crazy.
Right. So then actually, let's dig this a bit deeper into this. So it's true. So what we will break through at one point and develop machines that are universally, let's say, better than us, smarter than us. Once we do that, those machines, theoretically, are likely to improve themselves and to continue to do so. And we love intelligence. We love automation. Like, we're just going to keep building this. Like, let's be honest, right? There's little stopping us from moving forward. And at whatever pace we move forward, at one point we will break through and we'll develop these machines. Now the question is, can we control it? At one point they will break through, and when they will start improving themselves, and we're just at the very beginning of that exponential curve. Once that takes off, like, are we going to be able to control AI? I'm not saying is it going to be bad or is it going to be good. Are we going to be able to control it?
I'm on the extreme positive spectrum of this.
All right, so you're an optimist.
I'm a very big optimist when it comes to this. Of course, there's risks.
Right.
But for me, I see AI as not something that's outside of humanity. I don't see it as us and it, or us and them. I see it as a tool that we will incorporate in our lives to such an extent that we can be able to imagine living without it eventually. And this will happen very quickly, as it has happened with electricity and the internet. And every introduction of such a big new phase of our civilization and development, the acceptance and adoption happens even faster.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not afraid that AI will suddenly become super smart and outsmart us all and enslave us or any of this. I don't believe in this because, first of all, we're quite far away from this point still in time, because we still lack computational power for that. But when the time comes, I believe we'll be more than ready to it will be part of us. So it's, again, probably if there are people who refuse to use it, they will be definitely outsmarted by those who use it.
Right.
I don't see AI as a separate thing from humanity.
I think that's, a problem here is as well that, we're in a race to develop this technology because of the tremendous competitive advantage that you mentioned. And, we develop, but the question is, are we doing so? Are we going to be able to create the conditions to do so, to develop and use this technology safely and responsibly, And that's, I think, an ongoing debate. Are we actually thinking through what we're building? Because yes, we want to build it. It makes sense. Like the amount of, the problems that we can solve, the value we can create, it's just so valuable. Like we have to do it, but the question is, are we thinking enough about the safety and the ethical implications? Does that concern you? You think we're, and also let's say you're on the very, optimistic side of things in terms of the value and the fact that we're going to use it for in the right ways. But are you not concerned that it's going to inspire us to destroy each other? Because if we are in this competition, let's say, China manages to, let's say, develop the technology before the United States, and, the United States understands like the importance of that. Are they not likely to be like, let's just bomb them, or like because it has a huge implication on a geopolitical scale. Even right now, let's say the geopolitical landscape is very fragile. The rise of China, conflicting with US being the world leader, wealth and power is increasingly to the east, and now the geopolitical landscape is very fragile, and we can see that, through the news. I think that's there. But the question is, we have Russia, we have China, we have, United States. They are going to weaponize AI. That's almost a fact. They already are. Are we going to use this technology to destroy ourselves? That's also a question. So you're an optimist, but do you think we're going to take, this amazing technology and use it for the worst possible thing?
I don't think we can do it intentionally. And I don't think anyone will do it intentionally, because we are already so globally interconnected.
Right.
Our economies are so dependent on each other.
Yep.
That I don't think anyone would just start such a war. Of course, that's a completely separate topic, but no, I'm positive. And when it comes to using AI for an attack, for example,
right,
can use it as well as for defense. So it's like
you think it's gonna stay in the balance also, because
I'm sure about
like
it.
Right now, if China suffers, the world suffers, right? It's almost a fifth of the global GDP. So you're saying we're so interconnected and so reliant on each other, to the extent that now we hold each other accountable in that way, that we're not going to be there. It wouldn't make sense for one civilization to try to overwhelm the others.
No, I don't think so. And actually, I'm a big fan of this race, technology development race, because it will help us overcome some of the biggest existential threats to our civilization, like climate change, or eventually even
for sure,
asteroids. And there's a few such big threats that right now we barely can handle,
right,
if at all. And with this technology, a few decades from now, we most probably will be able a lot better to tackle than now. And I don't think humanity will destroy itself or anything like that. On the contrary, it will allow us to actually also become interplanetary species.
I do believe in that vision as well. I think that I worry that we're most likely not thinking through when we develop these technologies. We just are. I do think there are consequences that we can foresee and build with that in mind. I don't think there's enough discussion around that. That's something I do believe in. But I do agree that this technology, like if we're able to develop it the right way, use it responsibly, it's tremendous amount of value. Like we can solve so many problems. And I do agree that, thinking 100-year plus, becoming, kind of colonizing our solar system is the next step.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, we need to have, this type of technology there, right?
But going back to Earth and the short-term applications, again, I'm going to quote people from this Innovation Institute.
Yeah.
I've learned quite a lot from them, and I keep learning at every interaction I have. Very few interactions between people have malicious intent, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I might be a bit too optimistic, but I believe in the greater mind. There's very few people and very few interactions that actually have the goal to hurt someone. And by developing again these technologies, we are preparing ourselves better, not only for existential threats, but also helping us understand each other a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, there's a lot of conflict right now in the world, but we are actually living in the most peaceful time in recorded history.
Yeah. Prosperity is through the roof. If you
exactly.
But then it's just the headlines. We're still interconnected, and there's still a lot of headlines around that. But right now we're in the most peaceful,
exactly,
period we've ever been in.
Something that actually I believe is a really, really big problem is biases. And by biases, this includes not only commercial interests,
right,
but also old ways of thinking regarding the differences between people, whatever the difference could be. It could be sex, religion, ethnicity, whatever difference you think of. Back in the day, people were really hostile. Nowadays, it helps through this technology and through the globalization, it helps us accept each other.
Right.
It helps us understand each other a lot more, which is an amazing benefit, something that a few hundred years ago, people didn't have. And they were just scared of everyone who's different. And it's incomparably better, and I believe it will become a lot better even in the future. It is still a challenge, though, because especially when it comes to developing artificial intelligence, when all the data you have is biased,
right, exactly,
the AI will always be biased as well. And that's one of the biggest problems. And so, of course, there are problems. I just don't think they're existential.
Yeah. You think that these are solvable problems?
I think
we're going to figure it out.
Actually, because of the emergence of a technology that is affected by our biasness,
right,
it allows us to understand and realize these biases. I'm also involved in an organization called Humanity of Things. It's an NGO here in The Hague. And there we are trying to educate people to create awareness of and increase the digital literacy of society, understand what it means to be human in order to be able to develop technology better. And when you are developing technology to have the human being in the center and the maximum benefit of the human being and society in mind, rather than the highest short-term return on investment.
Yeah. I really like that. But so then that's also my worry. I think most companies don't think from that human perspective, right? That's why I think that maybe companies will not develop it the right way.
Yeah.
If you think from a human perspective, I completely get you, but are you now worried that companies are not developing it the right way? I mean, that's also what the NGO stands for, right?
There's definitely some questionable applications. But mostly, I think we're going the right direction.
All right. I mean, we will stumble along the way. It's part of the process, I think.
Of course. And as I said, it helps us understand what it means to be a human in the first place, and understand that how we look or what we believe in or things like that don't really matter. We're all humans. Quite equal, quite the same. Even though we like to be unique, we're all
right.
So all of this is going in the right direction. I can give you a very interesting example of So the European Commission, the European Union is putting a lot of effort and resources in regulating artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
That's something that I've been very interested in and involved with in the past few months. But I don't think we should be talking about regulating artificial intelligence. I think we should be talking about regulating technology in general, starting with software in general,
Right.
which AI is part of. It falls under this category. But you can't just label AI as something you need to regulate and put ethical considerations on top. Like, it's in general how we do business. It's in general how we build our business models and how we build our technology that we need to reevaluate and think, is this the best way? Do we do it with the best goals in mind? And then if we already had all of this in check, I don't think AI would be any different than any other emerging technology. But it's exactly because we don't have this, and the biasness that we all have, and the lack of trust that we have in each other, as you mentioned yourself, the competition between China and the US. If we have transparency, if we have the proper trust levels,
right,
no one will be even thinking of that. So I don't think the problem is in the AI. The problem is in the way we do business, in the way we communicate with each other still. So there's a lot to improve in society rather than the tools that we use, because AI is just still a tool.
Yeah. Yeah, with in regards to the US and China, I think there's also a political nature to it, in the sense that the one who leads also gets to kind of set the boundaries on a global level, and China has very different ethical and different type of standards than we do here. It doesn't mean it's worse or better, but I think the nature of, let's say, the political conflict there is a bit different, and I think the dynamics there might be inherently hostile, even with increased transparency. You have different interests,
of course,
and you have a different vision for the future, and you like to to be the leader. And maybe that's why I think that it's going to be a bit more conflicting there. I do believe we'll figure it out. I think over time it's in our best interest to do so. So at least I would hope so. I really wanted to ask you. So you said AI is far away, like in terms of us developing artificial general intelligence.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
not just a narrow AI that already we have that, and there's already AI out there that can do specific tasks much better than we do.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about having someone well-rounded, like a human brain, which can think, and be flexible and adapt really well to what's given, and let's say we have something like that much smarter than us, you think that's really far away, right? Is that what you were saying before?
Yeah. So
most likely it's going to take a lot of breakthroughs.
Artificial general intelligence, I think it's not coming anytime. Some experts say it won't be even in this century. Others say it might never happen. If it doesn't happen, it will be because we merge with it. That's how I see things. And as I told you, by the time that technology develops and computational power develops so much that we'll have something potentially smarter than us, it will be just part of us.
I do think it's a bit inevitable, because we're going to continue to develop it, because we need to solve these problems, because it's so valuable. The pace, I think, we have been progressing tremendously. Even if you progress much slower, but you keep progressing forward, so there's nothing that stops us, then I think at one point we will develop someone like let's say someone smarter than we are, a machine. But you say that it's probably going to be an extension of us, and I think you already see that.
I see it as part of us.
Already there's, for instance, Elon Musk, right? He's developing, I think, Neuralink, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, increasingly we're going to connect. I mean, hopefully we have something safe before we implant it in our head, But I think there's a lot of potential there. And that's what you mean when you're talking about it merging with us? Like, we're basically going to be cyborgs, like, basically.
Yeah.
More or less. Like.
Yeah. Well, I can, that's an interesting term, because we can argue that we already are kind of getting there with, I'm not talking even about the recent technology. We are using pacemakers, for example, for decades to help people with heart problems. And it's just a matter of time until we develop technology that will help people with brain problems or disabled people to live a normal life. This will be the first step, and this is exactly, you mentioned Elon Musk. That's exactly what his companies is focusing on. And their first application, so it's about brain-computer interface.
Right.
Their first application is people suffering Alzheimer's and paralysis, I think, to allow them to actually live a more life, which is fascinating, and that's why I'm so positive about all this, because this is just the first application. Eventually, we'll get to the point where these tools will help us be better at everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the tool itself will become better than us.
Yeah. Again, you think collectively, like we're going to use it. We're going to decide how to use it. And that's collectively we'll be better off.
There's one big concern here, whether everyone will have equal to it though.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, right? Because even if you look nowadays, I think we're just a few months ago, a lot of tech companies flew past the 1 trillion market cap, and you just start realizing how much, collectively, I think they make up a good chunk of the S&P, like a good 20%, So I think you realize how much wealth and power is being concentrated into these tech companies. And they have the resources to be able to develop AI, to develop quantum tech, to develop these technologies. And the question is, this is not, yes, increasingly technology in itself, in its nature, is equal. It gives, we all have access to the internet. We all have a platform. We have that, But the question is, are we, we're using these social networks, these platforms. We're not asking questions, and we're not thinking about how our data and our digital identities, and that's value, for the companies, and also the wealth and the power that we're giving to these companies by using their services. Are you worried about that? Because I guess this doesn't fit into the nice vision of where we're using the technologies for the human. Now there's a few organizations who have a tremendous amount of power. So, yeah.
Indeed, I think there's a few organizations that are becoming a bit too powerful, but they're powerful not because they created that power. Society created the power and gave it to them, and this power is called attention and giving them our own data. The more society realizes that the power sits where we put it, the more the less risky situation will be with these powerful organizations. And I think we're moving in the right direction, because Facebook is a very interesting example that in the past few years have been forced to move into different services, different models, because a lot of people don't want to use it as a social media anymore.
Right. I mean, we're increasingly aware of our, how our data is being collected and processed, and we want to take ownership of it.
Exactly.
So we hold companies accountable to treating us fairly in that sense. You think that we're going to hold these companies accountable?
Exactly. And that's actually going back or connecting to the previous topic on the regulation of AI,
right,
or of technology in general. It's the same thing. The as long as you have transparency and everyone realizes their personal risk and their everything that the decision to use a certain service comes with, the easier it will be for everyone to be to use it in the way that they want to.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the power lies in. And all these companies, once again, imagine if not necessarily a certification of sorts, but literally, as long as there's transparency, and that's where regulations can come in, as long as there's transparency, people can choose where to put their vote. And you put your vote on a daily basis, depending on the services you are using, to which company do you give power? To which service do you put your attention?
Recently I had a podcast with Marco Corradin. He's the innovation government working for the Ministry of Finance. And he brought in some really interesting discussion points on this. Basically, the point is we're feeding these social networks with our data. And on an individual level, we care, or at least we're starting to care. And we're starting to be a bit more aware. You know, we look at the fields we fill in, we understand a bit better. But something that he says is missing out is collective responsibility. So you don't maybe understand how your data, together with other people's data, can be used to move things, right? So this is the same as with like Russian interference with the U.S. election. That's just a classic example. But then the question is, you know, down let's say, thinking 10 years down the road, we're going to be able to use data like we have never been able to use before with AI, right? So then the question is, are we collectively programming artificial intelligence of the future? I think that's actually Elon Musk's theory, you know?
Recently.
Yeah.
Discussion, exactly.
I thought it was super interesting. You know, we think on an individual level, I was like, hey, you know, like I'm completely fine with what's happening. But you don't, on a collective level, we don't really think about that as much, you know? And that's what gives them a lot of power on an individual, on a collective level, right?
I think the more scary thing is not the power, it's more on the collective biasness.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that sometimes crowd knowledge could be surprisingly good and mind-blowing results. But then sometimes we see hiccups with the mass public having too much power when they don't realize how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Recent years with some elections, we've seen such examples, for example. Without going into too much details, but that's exactly why we need more awareness. Every single thing that we do, it has an impact. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm too small to affect in any way. But when you multiply this by 1 billion, it's not too small, it's huge.
So what are you doing to, let's say, protect your data or your digital identity, or to make people more aware of this?
I'm personally trying to be as privacy. What we are also trying to do is educate people a lot on these topics, and through our programs, through our events that we are running, I like to think that we've helped at least a few people to realize that they need to be more conscious about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And not just on individual level, but also on business level. A lot of businesses are just jumping the hype train and not realizing the long-term implications. So try to point them in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I can see that I think to be able to build towards a vision, you need to be an optimist. I can see why, you know, you have this vision of where we're using technology and data and we're doing it the right way. And, you know, I really like that. And I think I would like to shift the direction of the conversation towards space, because I think that's something that you're really passionate about. And that is a topic that I'm very interested in. So I'd love to. So I listened to an interview with Jeff Bezos recently, and he talked about his vision for Blue Origin. Why he says it's the most important work that he does by far. And that's because Jeff just naturally thinks very long term. And he's, you know, he tried to kind of break it down, and I thought it was super interesting. He says basically, look, like right now, you know, our bodies naturally consume about 100 watts worth of energy. And actually, in developed countries where we consume most of the energy, or where we consume a lot more than the global average, individually on a civilization level, so in modern day society, we consume 11,000 watts per person, right? And that's growing at a pretty steady rate. So actually, even if you take the baseline globally of energy usage, you compound it at just a few percentage points for just a few hundred years, you would have to cover the whole planet in solar cells to be able to satisfy that energy requirement. So we're talking, let's say, 400, 500 years down the road, we will have to cap our energy usage, or we'll have to get we have to get creative. Like, how are we going to be able to have this dynamic, society and flourish when we are not able to satisfy our energy requirements, right? So I think what he meant is like, look, I want to make sure that the next generations, he was specifically think about his daughter and his daughter's daughter or son, and he was thinking, I want them to be in this dynamic society, and I want them to not live in a civilization of status. And that's his personal motivation. I thought it was super interesting. If you look at, let's say, Virgin Galactic, it's a bit more plain. It's more like, hey, we need to explore. We need to, expand our horizon. We need to get out there. Let's get people, to fly in outer space. I thought that was super cool, but I really liked Bezos, like, more like also practical. Like, he's like, hey, I'm solving a world problem here. We're not thinking about it because it's very far away, but it's coming. Is that what was your personal motivation behind space mining technologies?
It's quite similar, actually. I do believe that the next frontier is space, and although, as I already mentioned, there's quite a few problems and quite a lot of opportunities here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The number just explodes when you start thinking outside of. So there's a few things I want to mention based on your thoughts. First of all, when it comes to energy requirements, there's this thing called the civilization level development.
Right.
And there's a few levels defined, 3 levels.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, experts say that we are around 0.7 level. So we are not even at level 1. And level 1 being a civilization able to utilize 100% of its home planet resources in a sustainable way. We are still quite away from, still have quite some work to do to reach that point.
For sure.
The second level of civilization is being able to utilize 100% of the home star energy. And what's interesting is that if we, I think the number, I was looking at the research last year, I think the number was, if on the current level of energy demand on a global level, Earth, if we utilize only 1/6000 of the sun energy hitting Earth, we'll have 100% sun-powered energy source.
Right, we'll be able to power everything
exactly
with solar power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's 1/6000. If I'm not mistaken with the statistics, but it was crazy. And then that's, of course, our energy demand is growing exponentially as well. But then there's this theoretical concept, so-called Dyson sphere. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Where it's theoretical, and a lot of people say it's impossible to build, but it's basically utilizing 100% of the sun power coming from the home star. And then the third level, which is quite sci-fi, is utilizing whole galaxy level. But we are far away, but I think we're going the right direction. And I'm surprised, actually very positively surprised about the speed of climate change awareness. Because 5 years ago, a lot less people were aware of that. And I feel like every month there's more and more changes on even people, how they live their life, in their diet, and all of this, just to be able to save energy, to be more sustainable, to be more green. So we are going in the right direction in a combination of technology development, allowing us to utilize better and more efficiently energy sources, green energy sources especially, but also people being more conscious about all this. Something else is also the consciousness of there is a problem, and that's exactly probably the reason why things are happening so fast. There is a problem within the way we are creating energy, we are using energy. There's a lot of inefficiencies, and people are starting to become aware. Most importantly, businesses and governments are becoming aware, and there's a lot of innovation in this regard. No one can say when this will happen, but we are going towards also new energy sources. It's still kind of theoretical, but once we get out of Earth, there's of course helium-3 and fusion and technology, and when the amount of energy we can produce will be a lot more than we can now in terms of the rate of how much it costs us, also in the long term, and how much energy it comes out of it.
Yeah. I find this fascinating, and I think I can see why you're working on these two projects. They're just fascinating. I think you're thinking really long term, which is something that I really appreciate. You don't see that in a lot of people. And I really see that this is something that you care for, like on a personal level. You see why you should put in 100% of your energy there, So I'm thinking, now our audience is very diverse, but it's a lot of people who have a good sense of tech, at least a basic understanding. And what's the message you'd like to leave them with? Like, what's one advice that you as an entrepreneur would like to leave to our audience?
Well, I would say there's a lot of things I can say, but I would say we live in a world where everything is possible, and literally everything. And if you like something that you're really passionate about, and you think you are too inexperienced or too young or to work on, that's not true. You can always start, and you can always start contributing. No one is too small, no one is too young or too inexperienced. With the vast amount of information and knowledge everyone has access to, or most of us have access to, you can specialize in no time compared to in the past in so many different subjects. And most importantly, you can get connected to the right people in almost instantaneous way. This global world that we're living in is giving us wonderful opportunities. And I would say, as long as you're passionate about something, follow your passion, because that's what the world needs. The world doesn't need more people who are just following the same old rules and working from 9 to 5. The world needs people who are willing to work non-stop on their passion,
right?
Because that's what life is about, to improve yourself, to improve ourselves, society.
I agree. I think we tend to have certain, we tend to set limitations on what we can do, and I think that's derived just from your context, or from your culture, or from your parents, or from your peers. But I do think that if you open up your horizon and you just see all the possibilities, and you just start exploring, looking to different things at this stage, I mean, as a fellow student, you don't really know what you want to do, then just take this time to just get involved in different things, learn from different fields and different perspectives. And once you find something that ticks, then this is something I want to work more on, and you put in the work, and I think you will start to develop a sense of purpose and would love what you do, and then you win, right? Because you can work and it's not going to feel like work. I think that's what you're also trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. One of my biggest inspirators, called Peter Diamandis, he has this notion of major transformative purpose, that every one of us needs to find their main purpose and start working towards it. It could be anything. It could be education, it could be equality, it could be technology, it could be space exploration, doesn't matter. Find what you're the most passionate about, and then you'll be able to create the most value for yourself and for society by working on this.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing message to leave with. Bobby, if the audience wants to know more about you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn, I would say, is the easiest way. message me, put a note there because I rarely accept connections with random people. Just follow the social media of Space Mining Technologies. There's quite a few events, especially through AI Lab 1 focused on AI. We have a lot of innovative programs or innovation-focused programs that anyone can join, completely free and open to the public. So if you want to be part of such a community, feel free.
That's an amazing opportunity. Thank you so much, Bobby. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.